Now, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939.
Do you notice that barely a day goes by in which Donald Trump isn't conflated with and compared to one dictator or another, but one dictator, not in physical stature, but in his place in the pantheon, stands above all others? That is, of course, Adolf Hitler, the worst person in history. Now, Trump is being compared to Hitler because he's mentioned Hitler. I wouldn't be imagine if Trump actually grew a little mustache and imagine then, what would they, it's probably worth him doing it, because how would they handle that if he went, so I'm gonna grow a little mustache? Since they're comparing him to Hitler for appearing at Madison Square Garden and doing a rally. Hillary Clinton is clutching at straws now, isn't she? Saying that, because what she's claimed is that Donald Trump is like Adolf Hitler because he appeared at Madison Square Gardens, because, Hitler held rallies and Trump holds rallies, but Kamala's holding rallies. In a minute, we're going to be talking about how Kamala Harris is an extraordinary anomaly as a politician. But let's look now in some detail at the ongoing claim during the Kamala Harris campaign that the reason you mustn't vote for Donald Trump is because if you do, he'll make himself a dictator for life, just like the worst dictator there's ever been, Adolf Clarence Bobcat Hitler. Now let's have a look at Hillary Clinton making that claim.
Now, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now,
I like the way when people say stuff like, I write about this in my book. I wrote a book. I've been to a lot of trouble to write books. I'm trying to help you people by making tangential and tenuous comparisons between a modern tycoon billionaire who was on the TV for a bunch of years, whose wedding I went to. You know that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton went to Trump's wedding? If he is like Hitler, they're like people who went to Hitler's wedding. So Hitler couldn't get married, could he? Because he was a bit too complicated. He was sort of in love with his niece and stuff. That guy, he was off key in a bunch of ways. It's weird. Purple party propaganda. Screw all that stuff, man. We need to get beyond. Listen, you can't trust the government. Full stop. You don't want to be empowering anything other than God to run your life. These people want to claim power that they cannot handle and would use badly if they were granted it. That's the message. It's clear. It's simple. But another thing we have to watch out for is the fact that the people that are claiming that demonic tyranny will be the consequence of voting for their opponent are, in my view, closer to demonic tyranny themselves. Do you remember, for example, a period in recent history where there was unprecedented authoritarianism? Do you remember a time where you were near mandated, and if you were a government worker, literally mandated to take a certain medication? Do you remember north of your country in Canada, where truckers who were simply protesting for their right to work and not take that certain medication, if we can call it a medication, were compared to Nazis? Do you see that what Nazi means is, I deny your right to have an opinion? That's what Nazi means now. What Nazi meant in the late 30s and early 40s was National Socialist in Germany and all of the policies and the genocide and the horror associated with that issue. What it means now is, I don't want to bloody well listen to you. That's what it essentially means. Here's Glenn Greenwald talking about what's going on. Strange voting patterns for Hitler. New poll, Trump is getting record levels of support among young blacks and Latino men. And I think what's happening is people sort of are en masse recognizing that Kamala Harris is unelectable. Nevertheless, MSNBC are still campaigning hard through in the form of, is it Mika or Micah? It's the Lady of Morning Joe. Let's have a look at the Lady of Morning Joe. I remember her. I met her before. She's sort of saying that Trump's like Hitler, as usual.
His cozying up to dictators, his obsession with Hitler that has now come out, what he is...
He's obsessed with Hitler. Hitler is a fascinating historical figure, isn't he? Like Genghis Khan is a fascinating historical figure. Attila the Hun, a fascinating historical figure. Stalin, fascinating historical figure. Being fascinated by people does not mean that you want to emulate them. In fact, a key way to avoid that would be by saying, I am a conduit for power rather than a receptacle for power. That would be a good way of knowing it. Accepting spiritual values would, I suppose, be an antidote to the hubris and horror that tyranny in its darkest form represents. Do you think Trump is that? Or do you see another political party that via the state wants to lay claim to the powers of a god, i.e. the power to control what you say, the power to control what you think, the power over all forms of category and taxonomy through stuff like this puberty blocker story we'll be covering in a minute. Control over your ability to communicate. Control over your ability to move. Control over your ability to spend money. Control. Watch, as we discussed yesterday, the tendency towards control. What the propaganda machine is doing right now, and it's panicking, it's floundering, is tell you that the MAGA movement and Trump represent tyranny in its darkest form. But the darkest form of tyranny now is bureaucracy through bureaucracy and despotism through statism.
That has now come out. What he has said about our veterans and what he wants to do with the military against his political adversaries, it's all huge news. This is the future that we're looking at in the next Trump term, if there is one. But this is what voters know right now, that he is killing us. I'm talking about us women. He's killing us. He is putting us at risk. He is making us afraid to have babies. He is putting our reproductive health at risk, and some...
That's interesting, isn't it? Look, I know a lot of you have very strong views on this subject. It's one of the issues that's long defined politics in your country. But I feel like Trump said he's going to leave it to the states. Isn't that what his position is on the subject of abortion?
The war against free speech is in full swing. We are the vanguard, bravely fighting back. Rumble's the home of this channel, Stay Free, and a leader in defending the fundamental human right of free speech. They've joined X to sue a cartel of advertisers and ad agencies who conspired to block ad revenue from going to the platforms. Recently, they've launched Rumble Premium. This, I think, is going to be a game changer for all of us. It's an ad-free viewing experience with great perks for viewers and creators. Rumble Premium will give you the ability to dive into your favorite content on your mobile or desktop or smart TV and savor every uninterrupted second of my content. Why don't you upgrade to Rumble Premium today? Support my free speech and the free speech of other content creators on this platform. Please go to Rumble now, rumble.com/premium. And if you use the code BRAND, you'll save $10 and Rumble will be aware that our stream is creating great converts. So that's rumble.com/premium and do use the code BRAND to save $10. Anyway, there's a link there at the bottom of the screen now. We're posting it in the chat. Join up.
Women have died already because of this. So we can see right now what's coming.
What we are living through, I believe, is an attempt to emotionalize politics to the point where you can't even understand its proper parameters. Abortion is an emotive issue, whether you are pro-life or pro-choice. It's a very serious thing indeed to make that choice, to take that course of action, to end the life of a fetus or an embryo or whatever language suits you. The reason I suppose that we are migrating the discussion to that particular topic is because it is emotive and it doesn't allow you to have a kind of a clear, rational purview on a matter that should be rationalistic. Let me unpack that a little further. Politics must become about management and administration. It cannot be about ideology. Now, I know to have management and administration, you might argue that there needs to be an ideal. The ideal should be this: minimum amount of power, minimum amount of intervention, minimum relationships with globalist corporations, maximize the power of the individual, maximize the power of the community. For example, just off the top of my head, if a community were able to vote for themselves what their policy might be on any issue, First Amendment, Second Amendment, you might say these are enshrined and holy rights, but that in itself would be a secular claim. To make the First and Second Amendment holy would be to attribute to the nation the qualities of a God. What I believe is our principles must be derived from spirituality. There are laws that have been given to us. There are principles that we have been offered. And indeed, they are resonant because you know yourself when you act against those principles. You know yourself when you act against God, when you act against holiness. And you might even want to use a Jordan Peterson definition of God, the highest principle. Say you don't believe in God. I believe in God, as you know. But if you don't believe in God, what is the highest principle? When you act against the highest principle, valor, morality, decency, kindness, service, when you act against it, you feel it and you know it. What the state is trying to do, I believe, is marshal and control absolute power. It starts with the power to sort of protect the vulnerable, things that seem reasonable. Of course, it has to protect these arguments and encase these arguments in language that kind of makes sense and seems reasonable. You've got to give us this power in order to protect you. That's basically what they're saying. You have to stay in your home in order that you don't give COVID to... You have to take this medication in order not to give COVID to another person. Look at how that unraveled. You cannot trust people that use frothy emotionalism to legitimize further power. I believe the more you regionalize significant ideological conversations and decisions and policies, the fairer and more just society you will have. More just and fair still if the decisions you come to are guided not by humanitarianism, not by pragmatism, but by principles that come from a higher plane. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat about that. If you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, if we've posted it there later, turn on the notification bell. And if you're watching on Rumble, subscribe to our channel. Consider getting Rumble Premium and consider becoming an Awake and Wonder.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.